Hey folks, it's Lindsay Huddleston with SPS back in the building, Sports Psychology Solutions, for another episode of the SPS Edge Show. You also can listen to us on the Streets Are Talking podcast network. Shout out to Don Houston, Clarence, Sumo Barbour, my guy. But if it wasn't for these two gentlemen I'm going to mention right now, you wouldn't be hearing us. Our reach wouldn't be so wide and our discussion wouldn't be so deep. I want to thank my co-host, Mr. Terry McCord Jr. He's also the SPS intern for this semester. He's been doing an excellent job, but I also want to thank Nassau. I refer to him as Coach Orlando Watkins. He is keeping us connected, keeping our watch so far, not just in the Metro Detroit area, but throughout the United States and Canada. And I'm sure after today's topic, we'll have a little bit more. Terry, how you doing today, man?
I've been good. A lot to digest after Tuesday night. Just sitting there watching it. MLB playoffs has been going on. The NBA finals has been going on. So it's been keeping me busy. School is always going to keep me busy, but always a good time to tune in and talk to you about what's going on.
No, man, I continue to say you've been doing an excellent job as producer of this show with the ideas you've been coming up with and keeping me, on my toes, and it's been great. But I want to pull from the headlines with what we're going to talk about today. Today being Thursday, October 1st. Wow, can you believe it? Just 2 days ago, there was the first presidential debate, if you want to call it that. As a person who was heavily involved in politics, Terry, and as someone who watched people like Coach Orlando Watkins, who was always in the know, always moving and shaking in Detroit, and influencing the power structure, I decided not to watch it. Not because I could have said I knew what it was going to be like, but I just really removed myself. Now, mind you, I'd already cast my ballot to vote. I've already imparted the importance of that along to my daughter at 8 years old, because that's how it was imparted to me. But, there was a lot of stuff that was going on in that presidential debate, particularly one line that affects, I think, not just the nation, but African Americans in particular, when sitting president Donald Trump was asked to denounce white supremacy and systematic racism, and he did everything but denounce it, but also did what some don't even call a dog whistle, because those are supposed to be subtle, but shouted out a white supremacist organization and told them to stand back and stand by. Now, why am I pulling from the headlines talking politics on this SPS Edge show that's supposed to focus on mental toughness in sports? Well, just yesterday, based on my membership in the Association for Applied Sports Psychology, a wonderful organization, which is an umbrella organization for sports psychology consultants like myself, I was able to take part in a very fulfilling webinar that was put on by ASP. Dr. Kensa Gunter, who's out of Atlanta, Georgia, who's actually the president of ASP, African American Female, also Dr. John McCarthy. And it was a great, great presentation. But before I get into that part, Terry, and defer back to you to kind of keep this thing going, I also want to acknowledge a person who wasn't a part of the presentation, but has definitely been an influential person in the Association for Applied Sports Psychology, and that is Dr. Leisha Carter, who's assistant professor out of Long Island University, Brooklyn. The reason I bring her up, because several years ago when I joined ASP, Terry, she was like that person you meet when you come into an organization. She's the one that's right there to greet you and bring you in. And I have to give her credit, man. She was Black Lives Matter before it was Black Lives Matter, Terry. I mean, she was talking about some issues that were happening within the organization, some issues that made African Americans and other minorities feel marginalized within ASP. I mean, they will definitely not disagree with that. And she was really going hard. I mean, she was protesting and going hard. And I believe somewhat before her time, because now based on her hard work, ASP has been one of the organizations that's been on the forefront, Terry, of talking about Black Lives Matter issues, especially during this time of COVID. So I just want to put an acknowledgement out to her. I appreciate it coming in contact with her and the interactions we did have. I definitely want to acknowledge it. So, okay, so here's what I'm getting at, Terry. And we're going to go to you. I want to use your expertise as a great player, as a leader, just as a wise young man. Taken from the presentation by Dr. McCarthy, he talked about coaching happening in a context, meaning that whatever is going on in the world, that's the context within coaching happens. Now, you can be Mel Tucker getting your guys ready. I was just on the phone with Scott Hazelton, who's a new defensive coordinator for Michigan State University. We were on a Zoom call, and he gave some jewels about how to prepare to go to the next level. But it just talks about coaches come to the team, the people that they are. And you can have the traditional coaching style that Coach Watkins and I were talking about a little bit earlier, or the holistic style. But particularly when you talk about the traditional style, Terry, these are coaches who stay within their comfort zone of expertise of what they know. So if you have a coach, and although he may have recruited all throughout the country, all throughout the state, in all different areas, Terry, but he still comes from maybe a particularly conservative background. And many people agree that in Michigan in particular, many coaches come from a conservative background. Now, your coach Dave Jones and my coach Bill Carter, I grew up with, definitely wasn't nothing conservative about these guys. We know who they are and what they're about, right? But overall, we talk about that. And one example I'll use, this is not to throw darts, but it's just something that's a close example. I'll use Coach Tom Izzo as an example. And he could be a running example throughout that. Now, first of all, let me say that in the wake of all the civil unrest that was happening, Dave Jones and my coach Bill Carter, I grew up with, definitely wasn't nothing conservative about these guys. We know who they are and what they're about, right? Got to double up. We talk about that. And one example I'll use, that me right there. Sorry, guys. You good? So anyway, what I was getting at is that what that's telling me, I think we have access to a greater audience, Jerry, just with that right there. Let me just make sure I connect. Yeah, great. That's I want to thank Coach Watkins for better connecting us. So basically, what's happening is this, man. How can a sports psychology consultant like myself, what are the things that I can do to better help other individuals, whether it's a coach who may be on the fence about how he feels politically, because he may be a Republican who's a huge Trump supporter, and he's dealing with kids from an urban area. So you have these polar dynamics, polar opposites, if you will, in their politics. I mean, I'll just use that as an example. And before I go to you, I just think I want to add a few more things from the presentation, particularly the power differentials, meaning that regardless of the level of the coaches hold a position of power. I don't care if you're a middle school coach, a high school coach, a D1 college coach, Hall of Fame coach, NBA, you got a position of power over someone. And for individuals who are from traditionally marginalized groups, Terry, like you and I as African-American males, that could be a big issue because you got all this stuff going on in the world, but the coach who's in this position of power still continues to wield his power. And it may be in direct contradiction to what you believe in. Supporting Breonna Taylor, justice for her, supporting George Floyd, justice for him, etc. So I said a mouthful to get this thing going, Terry, and I know you're very well prepared to respond. So with that, I'll put a pin in things that I was saying. So what can you take from what we've shared so far and add to this discussion?
One thing that I took out in the slideshow that you provided me with was the coaches getting awareness. I think that's a key for coaches who come from different backgrounds and are now in relationships with players that come from another background. I think, like they said in the slideshow, I think the first step is like, where is their stage of development? I mean, you have to see where they come from, their knowledge. Like it's like almost like an evaluation. It's like a pretest, It's like how much do I know about this and where do I need to go to get better? I think that was a good way to point it as the first step. I think the next step they put it as build supportive relationships with the coach. So I think now that you figure out what he's about and what he knows, that's where you start to bring in a little bit of your background and then build that relationship to support one another and get to know each other. I think it all starts with listening and being able to relate. Even though you can't relate, you may not think you can relate, but I feel like in some way there has to be some kind of similarity in between the two. I think the next step would be ask questions. I think instead of assuming, I think this is the right approach because I mean everyone is prideful where they come from and their background, as you can see like today. But I think instead of coming with irrational assumptions, I think it's very key that we ask appropriate questions and not being afraid to have those uncomfortable conversations, but also bringing them up appropriately. And I think the last thing is what we saw with Coach Tucker, and he's bringing resources, providing resources and practical ideas for supporting players. I think we saw that with financial literacy We saw that with just having a place where, where I like to call it just air it out, a room where players and coaches can let go of that rage that sometimes, gets kept, like, that keeps being kept in themselves, is what I'm trying to say, and just being able to let it out. So I think it's very key that's a big start. Is what, if I was a program and I see this happening, I see a coach coming from a different background and he's trying to coach the inner city kids. I think that's the first step: getting awareness, talking to that coach, letting him know this is where they're coming from. I understand where you come from, so let's try to see if we can build it together.
Very good, Terry. You said a lot of great points there, and by bringing up Coach Mel Tucker, you kind of made a natural example that we can point to when you talk about a Hall of Fame coach like a Tom Izzo from Iron Mountain, from the UP, probably just conservative in his background based on how he grows up. My experience in politics tells me your politics are based on your zip code, man, where you grow up at and what you experience. And then you look at someone like Mel Tucker from Cleveland, African-American man, definitely comfortable in the position that he's in. So you talk about these two different dynamics where you may have civil unrest going on, and because of how someone, and I'll use again Coach Izzo as an example for the sake of this discussion, who may have a conservative view and just may have a different viewpoint based on his experiences, and then you may have the potential for conflict if you don't have a very evolved coach who's not on a power trip and says, it's my way, the highway. I'll give you an example of that in a moment. Then you have a Coach Mel Tucker who can almost infer what his players are going through. He can almost relate, because just as a kid on the football team may get pulled over by the police at gunpoint, hell, Coach Mel Tucker may have experienced the same thing. But another dynamic I think is important, especially based on the viewpoint of the decision maker. If Mel Tucker has people on his staff who are not receptive and supporting the movement in the way he needs them to, he's in a particular position to influence that. If the head coach was all about, Proud Boys, if you will, and important things that are just out of order, and we'll definitely talk about that in a second. If the head coach is on that, what's going to stop an assistant coach from taking on that same view? So you talk about that, and I want to stay on that a little bit when we talk about that power dynamic. In the presentation, they talk about understanding the approach and methods of the coach. There's a coach-centered approach, and there's an athlete-centered approach. And Coach Tom Izzo will be the first one to tell you that Michigan State is a players-coach team. And you being an athlete, you understand that concept where players are allowed to give feedback, they're allowed to express their opinion. And Coach Izzo will even tell you it's really his guilty pleasure. He likes it when his guys come back at him. I mean, he really likes it when his guys challenge him on what's going on. But then you take the opposite of that. You have, that coach-centered thing where it's, coaching and it goes down. It's like, this is my decision to go there. An example I'll give, I want to say his name was Buzz Davis. He was, at the time, he was a coach of Virginia Tech. He ended up getting the Alabama A&T job. Excuse me, Alabama and A&T job. But I remember something he did that kind of offended me, man. This is during the whole discussion about the flag. And one day in practice, he brings in all these military veterans. And he lines them up nose to nose in front of his players, right? And he almost forces his players to defer and be respectful to them. And I was kind of like, man, that's bullshit. I was really bothered by that. If you're able to see the video, you see I'm proud, and I wear gear that has the American flag on it, whether it's through the Olympics, my time with USA basketball, whatever it may be. But I'm also a veteran. I served in the military. My brother served. My dad served. All the brothers in my neighborhood, despite what stereotypes say, we serve. So to see this white coach almost force his patriotism, if you will, onto these black players, I was offended by that. And I think that's a perfect example of, what if you that kid, Terry, that just got recruited by him? You come from an environment where you don't have a disrespect towards these people, but as an American citizen, you feel that you have the right to silently and peacefully protest. You feel you have the right to go against, what everything was saying. And for the sake of a definition, then I'll defer to you right after this. You mentioned that word rage. And I think, language is important. And I'm thankful for this presentation because it gave a clarifying definition of rage. And it defined rage, and I'll read this. It defined rage, Terry, as a deep-seated emotional response to experiences of degradation and devaluation. Rage builds up over time as a result of cumulative suppressed emotions precipitated by voicelessness. We've heard that word before. It is distinguished from anger, which is an emotion connected with immediate experiences. See, we get angry if somebody hits us, and you get angry right there. I'm mad, he hit me. But rage, Terry, comes after time and time again. The George Floyds, the Sandra Bland's, the Trayvon Martin. See, that's enough to build that rage. And one question I think is very important that people in my position, athletic leaders or influence can ask, and I think this is really important. Instead of asking what's wrong with the player, like what's wrong with you, ask them what happened to you.
Yeah, I love that one too.
Tell me why you love that one. Let's hear from you.
I think it just switches the, it allows you to switch perspective. I think a lot of times we think of problems that happen to us and we think of our feelings all the time. So I see a kid acting up like at school say I'm a teacher and I'm like, man, what's wrong with that kid? Like, what's going on? He's always giving me an attitude. He's always giving me some kind of fits about me, telling him to do his work. And a lot of my teachers talk about it all the time. They just ask the question, what's happening to him at home? And later on, you see whether it's like issues going on with parents or someone died, and other external things that's affecting him and letting that rage build up. And I think it's important for coaches to do the same. We're talking about a person that's held, that's being held accountable to allow these players to feel that rage, and also sometimes not even letting it get to that point where it's rage. I think, like you mentioned, deep-seated emotions. I think for something to get deep, like you mentioned, it takes time and time and time. And I think as we switch, as it being a tool to stop rage, I think we need to solve it head on. I don't think we need to let it, I like to refer, when I saw the rage definition, I referred to it as a seed. We don't need it to keep planting and keep adding water to it. And in a sense, we'd be adding fuel to the fire almost, making the rage get worse. I think we need to handle it appropriately. And I think with this tools that I'm really blessed to be able to read it. I think with these tools, it gives us a sense to have a sense of common ground, what to do when this happens. And I think this is very important. I think right now we're in a sense of confusion and people are enraged. And I think this is a chance for us to come and talk about these different things. And I think that's a perfect example of being able to come from different backgrounds. And like you mentioned with the coach at Virginia Tech that went to Alabama A&T, man, that's like one of the worst ways to force your ideology on someone. I mean, like you mentioned, what would I do as a recruit? As a recruit, if he's recruiting me and I hear that, I wouldn't feel comfortable. I wouldn't feel like this coach would care about my feelings. And I think I was blessed to have a coach, Coach Jones, to allow me to feel different feelings and give feedback. Because at the end of the day, a coach and a player, that relationship goes on forever. And I think if I'm making a decision where to play at the collegiate level, I'm thinking, can I build a relationship with this, with this coach in the future? Can I see myself, being because at the end of the day, a coach is your representative of you and your program. Mm-hmm. So I think for someone to represent me, I would want my coach to be comfortable with my feelings. So I think a lot of times this is a great common ground for us to really talk about those feelings.
Yeah, I mean, these coaches can have these views. They can coach their players, but go back to their respective communities, if you will, and still espouse these views. But because they're in that position of power, they can continue to go on. And I do want to stay on the term rage for a minute because, again, what really inspired me to include this as part of our podcast discussion today was, again, that approach of the trauma-informed approach. Because when you pose a question instead of what's wrong with you, when you say what's wrong with you, you're almost putting fault on the individual who was
exactly
wrong. What's wrong with you, Terry? What's your problem? And then you get into this mental toughness thing. And I think there's a difference between how I approach mental toughness and someone saying, just suck it up. I don't want to hear it, get past it, just block it out. But that's someone that's not recognizing all the other things that's been taking place. And as we talked about with rage, you have to realize, man, rage is something that is a real thing. So again, since Trayvon Martin, man, we could start naming names. We could probably play, I don't want to say play a game, but I probably could say a name, then you could say a name, then I could say a name. I mean, we could just go on and on. So with that being said, from the moment that first experience happened, I continued to use Trayvon Martin because for me, that was my post-racial America experience. That's when I said, damn, so this is what it's like to be a black man in America. Not so much what happened to Trayvon Martin, but from what everything I heard people say, and I was totally blown away. Now, let's talk about rage in a different way. And since we're kind of close to the halfway mark of this great discussion, what prompted me to do this is talking about President Trump's comments regarding the Proud Boys. Now, I'll walk a fine line so not to give them an unnecessary pub on this platform, but for the sake of our viewers and listeners with the Streets Are Talking podcast and all the great people that Coach Orlando Watkins is helping us reach through the AAU community and beyond, and your followers and mine, I'll just do a little bit more education on that. Man, I researched these guys some more, man. They are clowns. I say clown Terry with a straight face. I mean, what you see here when you talk about rage, and one of the founders of this organization, and he says off the wall things like if someone wants to disagree with your point of view, just choke them, just punch them in the face, and then he just allows us to get to saying things like just kill them. And then he makes these comments like, oh, when I show up with my MAGA hat with my boys, this is what we do. But they're on some coward tip. They always got to roll deep. They always got to call the police. As we put where we from, what we know, we don't call the police if you're really trying to get down. So what I look at, the Proud Boys are representing individuals who, despite their white privilege in America, still seem to have internal unrest. And then even to use the name boy. Now, as an African American, I have issues with boy because of historic context. But as a man, why do you want to refer to yourself as a boy? What unaddressed issues you and all your followers will come up with, and then you come out with it in the name of white supremacy. And the interesting thing, and there's another thing in the notes, is the white silence. And the white silence has been deafening, Terry. And I take it the reason why there's so much white silence, that even though people may say they're appalled by groups like the Proud Boys and those white supremacist tactics, some of them may say, well, if it works, I might be able to benefit. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like, you're not going to encourage anyone to do anything bad, but if they turn around and hand you the spoil of the victory, you're going to take that. So it wasn't my intent to go into that, but I just really want to say that I'm unimpressed. Donald Trump is the leader of the free world. He's the leader of the strongest military in the world. I know that as being a member of the military. And you mean to tell me the only people you can call on is some off-the-wall whack group? I mean, come on. There's nothing fly about that. There's nothing impressive about that. You didn't call on former Navy SEALs. You didn't call on law enforcement, retired law. I mean, you called on some whack job group of people who don't even promote something that's beneficial to the public as a whole. So I won't even go into much detail about that, but I do want to say a few more things for our audience to talk more about the great content we got from the webinar. And I think it's important to understand this. A term that was introduced when you start dealing with that racial trauma, when that question is posed by these coaches, when a kid comes in or they get a phone call, and instead of saying, what's wrong with you, what happened, there are things called internalized devaluation. Check out that terminology, Terry. Internalized devaluation, direct byproduct of racism extricably linked to the deification of whiteness and the demonization of non-white hues. Oh my God, the deification of whiteness. Now, to all my white brothers and sisters out there, I got love for you, but I understand when we talk about how we deify whiteness, that if it's white, it's right. If it can't be wrong. And the sad part about it, the way that plays into white superiority is that if people deify white people, the white person is sitting there thinking, well, I must be all that because look how they're treating me. So even if that wasn't what they were on, it's being reinforced. Also, the assaulted sense of self. This is the accumulation of recurring experiences with internalized devaluation, like we talked about. It's perpetuated throughout society, including the very systems with the stated mission of serving our youth. So even these organizations, I was on a professional development call with Lansing Public Schools yesterday, and I got to give it up to the brother Tyrone Howard, Dr. Tyrone Howard out of UCLA. This brother came on that, Terry, and he put it down. He talked about how in many cases, these systems, these schools are perpetuating these things. I mean, you know what that experience was like, just recently transitioned from high school, where you can have
Right.
people who've been at these schools, and it's not about naming names, it's not about saying black or white, but they add to the devaluation of what individuals feel. And finally, that word again, voicelessness, internalized voicelessness. Against a barrage of unjustified, negative, debilitating messages. That's what makes us go off. We feel we have no voice. And then when you see no justice being given, and even in the Breonna Taylor case, to find out that homicide wasn't even being discussed with the grand jury. So there was no way at all there was going to be any type of murder charges brought. So you have that voicelessness, and you have our young people who seem to excel in other areas, whether it's academically or athletically. They get these great opportunities to go to these major institutions, but when you get there, you may run into a system that is not as designed to support you. It's only designed to get you to give great output as an athlete, but it's not recognizing you as an individual. It's not recognizing what is happening to your community. And the last thing I'll say, Terry, before I defer to you, I think so many times white America confuses this one point. They make the assumption that because you're successful as a black person, because you've reached high levels of success, that you have access to capital, you have access to a lot of things many white people have access to, you should be okay. But what they don't understand is that there is a community effect as it relates to black people, and we are internally connected to our community, that no matter how successful you become, you want to be able to make sure your people are winning. And lastly, the last thing you want to be is someone who's been successful and you're not using your success to help other people, particularly you people of color.
I like that. I like the ending. I can kind of connect and relate with that. The first thing I want to say, I actually posted some on social media about that. Just want to give, just a little tip of advice, with things going on right now, me transitioning from high school to college, it can kind of be a little bit, my anxiety is a little high about it, and it can kind of be a little frightening because it's like you're moving from a situation in an area where there's low funding, low resources in Lansing schools to a place where they expect you to know this already. So, I mean, I'm doing well, but I know a lot of people who may not be feeling like they're doing as well. So I think one thing that we can do is don't belittle your value. Keep working. You got it. Always, even for anything, whether you're not going to college, trade school, whether you're starting a new job somewhere, keep working, keep pushing it. Don't worry about necessarily the struggles. Always look on the positive outcome of stuff. But I love what you said about how the internal connection. I think a lot of times people blame us for one to take care of our people. I mean, I had a friend that posted on social media talking about, who is a black-owned nail business, who's black and who does nails, want to support the people, and she got a lot of backlash saying, why does it have to be black? Why does she have to, and I think it's crazy because it's like no one talks about other people helping their people out. And, you see like the nepotism and handing out jobs, from my homeboy. Oh, I got a cousin that's starting to get in the business. Let me throw him a job. No one talks about these other ethnicity groups doing that, but they love to talk about whenever the black race, when we do that and try to support our own. And I think you see that times and times again with LeBron James trying to support his people, and you see people, giving back, and it's almost like they want us to stay low. And I think as an athlete who has reached that success, I feel like they have some kind of responsibility to do that, and it makes it harder. And I don't see the problem. It's almost like they're mad at someone who wants to give back to where they came from and speak out on these problems. Now, and it's like we already talked about that platform, but now not just speaking about it, they're doing something about it. So they're like, oh no, you're good. I like how you said, oh, you're good. You don't have to worry about that anymore. You got access to capital. You can do this, LeBron. And I like to speak in LeBron in perspective because he's getting scrutinized about anything. I mean, the man just won a game and they're asking him all these deep questions right after the game, about Breonna Taylor, about his thoughts about this, his thought about politics, with China and all these different thoughts. It's like, man, it's like you want him to just be an athlete, but yet y'all come and ask him these questions. So it's really crazy to me that, for these people to even bring this up, but it almost shows, again, like the mental toughness of African-American athletes to withstand all the scrutiny, the scrutiny about wanting to help their people. And it's it's almost like, we should all feel the responsibility to support them, but a lot of people don't feel that way.
Yeah, you're right. When you talk about those things, Terry, you make me think about the importance of athletes who are preparing to transition, particularly from high school to college, that they have to really work on developing their own political evolution. Who are you politically? Because, they talk about in the bubble that while the NBA is pushing for a huge voter campaign, that many of these players are not registered to vote. And that's
Mm-hmm.
unfortunate. So, I mean, if you got NBA guys who are not registered, what's really happening with the vast majority of athletes who are on these campuses? The reason why I think it's important that they work on evolving their political beliefs, I think we may have Commissioner Jewel Ware on one of our platforms right now who can definitely understand the importance of being politically active. Because what's going to happen, man, is you're going to get to somewhere in school and you're going to have all these things going around you on campus. When you talk about freedom
All
of
right.
speech and leading up to this election, when you start seeing extreme activities on campus, whether it's from the right or from the left, if you really haven't formed your political view, it can be overwhelming. And then you talk about the potential of having the conflict of a leader on your team or the leader of your team or a leader in your athletic administration, whether it's an AD or a president or even a very influential donor. Because even
Right.
though COVID is kind of limiting the face-to-face contact, we know, when donors make comments and say things, how are you going to feel if you're experiencing some tragedies and injustice in your community and you get this opportunity to go and represent, state university, whether it's Michigan State or any state, any fictitious school, it can be really hard because now, years ago, people weren't even that concerned about your politics. But now, with social media, people are watching your politics. Maybe even with James Harden, he had wore a Blue Lives Matter
Yeah,
beard, and it bothered me because he said he didn't know what it meant, and I almost want to say, okay, but who's in your camp, man? Who are the people that are around you? Are you
That's
around
what I'm saying.
yes men that they would say, it's okay. Chris Rock, I just watched a little bit of him on the Breakfast Club. He's doing a great job in the new show Fargo too. Anyway, that's another conversation. But he talked about, some celebrities or some African Americans being able to be on a hill and kind of seeing up and watching all the other things. Or he got a great joke he used a long time ago. He said, he's a celebrity, but his celebrity status don't kick in until you get it right around this close to his face. So it's not like the police officer will get out the car and say, oh, that's Chris Rock. He got to get up close on him. And I think that's a big misunderstanding because people try to call LeBron this and that and say, why are you concerned? You're rich. Do you understand how black people get down? We are connected, man. We are connected. And I just think that's the thing, and one more thing I want to say, and I want to get your thoughts, man. The importance of not just these coaches being able to make the right connection with their players, but whether they know it or not, when players are able to be more connected to their culture, and I'm not just saying your culture as it relates to your lineage, whether you are Native American, your family's from down south or from out west. I'm talking about the culture of the black community. The swag, the essence, and at the end of the day, it's what drives us. And it's so funny. It's so funny. On that note, and I wonder if I can pull this up real quick. I want to share something on my screen. And it's just the craziest thing, man. Let me see if I can get to this. Oh, I saw it. I said, please let me be able to pull this up in just one moment.
There we go.
Yeah. The item I want to show you, if you bear with me. Okay, the Proud Boys, right? I don't even mean to give these guys this kind of props. The guy here, do you see my cursor moving by any chance?
Yep.
All right, cool. This is the guy. He is Latinos for Trump. Latinos for Trump. Just like say African Americans for Trump. It can happen. I got friends who are African American Republicans big on it. That's Roger Stone. That is President Trump's fixer. That's his guy who do all the dirt and do all that stuff. And they're all throwing up not Kappa signs. I know you haven't chosen fraternity. I'm an Alpha. But those are not Kappa Alpha signs. These are white power signs. But looky down here, though, Terry. Look at these clowns. Here they are with their MAGA hats on, rocking their sign. But you would think that he was getting ready to drop his mixtape. He got the Adidas sweat tracksuit on for all of people who may be listening to us on streets is watching on the podcast. You can't see this. His other homeboy over here with Adidas tracksuit, a hat to the back. But this is my point. The hypocrisy. The hypocrisy. You screaming white power, but you showing black love. You screaming white power, but you showing black love. I don't know any white guys who started off wearing Adidas tracksuits. That was Run DMC. That's nothing but an ode to Run DMC and the originators, the hip hop originators. But it just amazes me how you can sit and be Proud Boys and talk about white supremacy, but you take everything from black culture. Everything. So that's part of my soapbox right there, man. I just wanted to show that, man. And again, shout out to the Association for Applied Sports Psychology. This would be a great plug for them right now. This is their website, and I'm proud to have been a member for several years. I'm proud to have been a presenter, being able to present on some of the things I even presented to your team about over the years at Eastern High School in Lansing. I've been able to travel the country with ASP to do that, and I think they're doing some great work. And that's indicative of what we're discussing today. But yeah, man, let me get back to this so we can get Terry back on the screen, man. Give him his full screen. But give me your thoughts, Terry. I shared a lot. I'd love to get what you thought from what I shared.
Proud Boys, man. I think it's almost, it kind of enrages me a little bit for somebody to be so proud and call themselves patriots. And I talked about this a lot, whether it's on my Facebook post, social media, and I want to really break down the word patriot, as somebody.
And real quick, and I think Orlando, the dude is Cuban. Oh, yeah. The dude is Cuban that I mentioned, and he's a Cuban, and he was the head of Latinos for Trump out of Miami, Florida. I just want to clarify that. And this guy was a Proud Boy. But anyway, thank you for that, Orlando. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So just basing off the term patriot, and I think a lot of times we forget what being a patriot really means. And I think a lot, like you see these I call them white terrorist groups. I'm one of those guys that likes to use that term because, they're doing nothing but spreading terror for minority groups. And I would like to refer to them as white terrorists. So I think with their tactic and using the word patriot, I don't see anything to be proud about. I don't think that's America to me, and our values and what we supposedly say. And for them to be so prideful of that, it's like, how can y'all be proud, of America, but then do these actions? And a lot of them, being a Christian based, a lot of them are using, Christian values and scriptures. And I'm like, man, they're just taking bits and pieces and creating their own narrative. And it's like, as a Christian, it makes me really upset. And it was hard for me to sit on that. And I'm hearing them speak and the different videos I've been watching, to educate myself. But I'm like, are they really sitting here using Christian scriptures and values to, really, validate what they're doing? And I'm like, are you serious right now? And it really, really makes me upset. And a lot of times, I like to go back to what Trump said, stand by, and to basically, I like to say is chill out right now. I used to, that was what I feel like he was saying to them. But I think of it as a way for him to, I would say, honestly, that Trump's campaign is honestly doing different things that benefits them. I think I would say that they're pretty smart by him doing that, but it's not morally right. I would not, I hate that he's doing that. But honestly, Trump knows who he's talking about. And I think as people, we see him targeting these groups. He got asked on national TV, to condemn white supremacy and white supremacists, and he couldn't do it. He dodged it. He started talking about Antifa and far left groups. And I'm like, no, man, that's not the question. The question was, do you condemn white supremacists? And he dodged it and started talking about, Proud Boys stand by and stand by. And it's like, no, for anyone that supposedly doesn't, relate themselves with them should easily be like, no. For me, it's like asking someone, like, are you involved in criminal activity? If I know I'm not, I'm going to say no. It's for people to be like, he's not racist or he's not that. But the thing is, though, Trump knows that this is an opportunity for him to keep that base. He knows who he's talking to. He keeps bringing up these different, little ticky-tack, little jabs at Joe Biden about these things. He knows who he's talking about. He's bringing up these different things like, why is that, Joe? Just picking. He knows the perspective of those kind of bases and groups, and he's using that to fuel his campaign. It sucks, And it's terrible that he's using that kind of tactic. But for the American people, we see this. This is not what America is about. Yeah, America was built on racism, but like as we strive and a new generation swoops in, and me being a part of it, as a young generation like myself, we see this. Now, we need to put this into action, though. We can't just talk about it on social media and tweet our little fingers off, talk about, go vote, go vote. It's like, no, we need to do our research, see what's right in front of us. I mean, the man did it in front of us. I mean, the views are probably off the charts for this one. Some people like you, just like yourself, decided not to watch it, but I know kids like myself are watching it. My boys are in there texting it in our group chat. And we're like, are you serious right now? He really said that? And like having that being right in front of me makes it very obvious for me to be like, oh no, like this dude, is very, he's not rubbing on me the right way. And he's never has, and he never will off that standpoint. But I think it's really crazy for someone to not even give the question any entertainment. I mean, he's just like, oh no, like Proud Boy stand by. And it's almost like, he's basically playing the victim a little bit, kind of justifying their actions because of far left. And the Antifa, I look at it as more of as an ideology, but we're talking about guys who call themselves the militia, the patriots. It's like, we don't really need, we're talking about guys who spread terror and talk about condoning violence. I mean, Gavin McInnes is one of the leaders. He's the founder of the Proud Boys. And I don't like to give him any pub, but I'll just give the viewers some context and look him up.
That's
and,
what
he's the founder.
It kind of upset me that he's a co-founder of Vice Media.
Oh, yeah, I remember seeing that.
Has all that racy stuff, and whether he's still affiliated, I was kind of, I was taken back by that, And he even said that the organization started as a joke. So it's almost like he's spitting this rhetoric, and somebody said, hey, I like that. And he turned around and ran with it, And, something you said I was going to mention also, too, when you talk about all that's been going on, it's just, to bring it back to the sports standpoint, you have all these things happening, and then here I am on campus trying to transition and, make the starting lineup. Here I am trying to be a better athlete. Here I am trying to get my weight up to be on this next level. And how can I get away from it? No one, again, I didn't watch the debate, but I know exactly what he said. So that's telling you the impact it's having, how it's traveling and making this round. And when we get to the point eventually where it's like, man, are these coaches or as a team, can you guys come together and have our back and speak up for us? Something they also talked about in the package, was supporting the athletes. And I don't think that's something that people look at all the time. It's almost like, oh, come in here, keep your head down. Let's not make it a big deal. Let's keep it within us, and let's go play the game. Well, yeah, you do that, and then you go home, and you can sit around the fireplace and tell, yeah, my guys went through this, but I'm living it. I'm living it. And I think, man, going forward, with we see it in basketball and the NBA, and October 14th is supposed to be the start of college basketball practice. Man, I'm telling you, Lord forbid that there's another incident, but once this basketball season get going, and a lot of these coaches, these basketball coaches who didn't get engaged early on, and if they run the risk of getting called out, because there's one thing to put about football, but basketball is definitely more connected, I think, to Black culture as far as a direct influence. Because you look at
so too, yeah.
Yeah, come on, let's just say, basketball is a whole different level. So if these coaches want to go and do that whole, well, we talked about it and we're good and we're family, it's like, no, man, if I can't hear you make a statement, if I can't, like, for example, and I love Coach Calipari, but what is he going to have to say to, Big Blue Nation down in Kentucky? What kind of statements is he going to make, soon? It's almost like he's a presidential candidate where you can ask him, well, do you denounce systematic racism? Now, mind you, Cool Cal, he got his talking points, but let's not kid ourselves. What about the idea of removing Adolph Rupp's name from the arena? Adolph Rupp was a known racist.
Oh, yeah.
Known racist, but they still go play in Rupp Arena. So I'll pose this question to you, Terry. When that big state, was going to be probably State Farm Champions Classic come up, when they go do like basically, Final Four, before the Final Four money grab, and I said that on purpose, when it's going to be Kentucky, Kansas, Michigan State, and Duke, all those teams. But What about in the press conference? Somebody posed a question. How do you feel about changing the name of Adolph Rupp? Changing the name of the arena. Is a pin go drop? Are they go evade the question? And if so, what answer can be an answer that's going to make a kid that may be getting recruited by John Calipari stay? And the last thing, if a kid is going to Coach Cal, going to Kentucky with the intent of being one and done, is that more reason for them not to be politically engaged because they're only trying to be here for basically a semester and then go to the lottery?
Ooh, I like the question. I think first I'm gonna hit what you said about Coach Cal speaking up about changing the name of Rupp Arena. I think one thing that I like to think about is the donors, and the board members, that are pouring money into this, into the team itself, paying for flights and new gear and, all these different resources that help teams, new facilities and, weight rooms included and all that, new, rims and anything really they could ask for. I think a lot of times coaches hesitate because they realize that, am I going to make people who are, unloading their pockets to my program upset? And are they going to continue to? And I think a lot of times you see that with various ADs that get brought up with these questions. A lot of times they don't want to upset the people. And I think a lot of times we put, our greed and what people think about us over, what's morally correct. And I think it's very, it's just very disappointing a lot of times. It's like we value money and, we value resources and winning instead of like what the right thing is to do. And just to go off the question you mentioned, like what would, as a player and going to coach, Coach Cal, how would I feel if he backed me up or if he did or not? I think that would be very important. I think, for someone to have an arena, first off, named after, a very racist coach, and down south, I mean, the SEC period, we're talking about the Running Rebels. Georgia's fight song is literally a Confederate song, has Confederate ties to their fight song. And I mean, a lot of these questions will be brought up. And I think coaches are, I hope not. I really hope and pray that they're not more worried about donors and their feelings than their players. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, the players make money. So I hope and I wish that Coach Cal does realize that and he considers his players' feelings. But then again, with the one and done scenario as a player, if I know I'm going there for one and done, I really don't like when players make the whole thing about getting their grades high enough so they can play and leave. We saw that with Ben Simmons at LSU. It's disappointing. I think as a player, knowing myself, I'm going to make the most of what I got, even though I know I'm going to be here for a year. Mm-hmm. And I really encourage players to do the same, like Imani Bates or these guys. They're probably going to be one and done maybe. Make the most of yourself, use everything you've got, with the resources the college gives you and make a direct impact and change. I mean, we see that again. I love to say it. LeBron James receiving that, economic empowerment, and he's pouring it out. And I think a lot of these players are going to get put in that situation. The new generation, LeBron's getting old. So, I mean, we're not going to see him on TV all the time playing. And so now it's a new generation and wave. We see guys like Donovan Mitchell, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown, and all these Trae Young. We see guys speaking up, and it's the new wave of generation. I think a lot of times these players who are making those colleges money, they can speak up. I mean, at the end of the day, the donors and all them know, and the president, they know that these players are making me money. Think of all the revenue that Zion Williamson, RJ Barrett, and Cam Reddish made, and Trey Jones that 1 year. I mean, everyone's paying all these big tickets to go see Zion play against, these teams, non-conference games no one knows about. Mm-hmm. Imagine that compared to like a marquee matchup with like Duke or something for like champions, State Farm, the classic in the beginning, Champions Classic. But I really encourage these players to speak out. I mean, I think players, whether they think about it or not, are in a sense of empowerment. I like to think of it like that because they determine how much money they make. So if as a player and I'm seeing that they're not backing me up, I'm going to think about going to a HBCU or a different school or a smaller school if their coach is really feeling me, and they're going to start seeing that money. I mean, the one thing, you can feel change when it starts affecting your pockets.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, man, and it's like when those donors and all those people notice that I'm not getting my money made, I'm not getting my money's worth, and these presidents are like, we're not making as much money as usual. What's going on? We see that, and it's a cause and effect. So I think athletes, one and done athletes, even if they're there for a program, we've seen the impact of being 5-star and making these colleges money. They're in a sense of empowerment in a way.
Yeah, no, you touched on it. You said 4 letters, HBCU. That's about
Woo.
to be the game changer because, as we said on our last podcast, with Deion Sanders going to Jackson State.
Yep.
And again, that's a very high-profile Hall of Famer going to a football program that can get some notoriety. But, man, you talk about an NBA prospect who can shoot right over to Howard or shoot to one of these other HBCUs. And unlike – I have a good friend. He's a big designer to a lot of athletes, particularly football players. And I would say, I saw him at a Piston game years ago. His name was Larry, Fashion International. I think Coach Watkins may be familiar with him. He's a staple in Detroit. And I remember asking, I said, oh, you got some basketball clients? He said, no, the basketball guys don't really come because people know who they are because they're so tall. But it's the football players who really come and get really styled up in nice suits because in most cases, unless you're a marquee player, people don't know who you are, but they dress a certain way. So my point being is, we're hearing this talk about the football players and going to play football at an HBCU, but boy, wait till they start talking about basketball games at an HBCU. And then fast forward, if we get to the point where we're beyond the point of COVID, where we can have that environment where you can see a pep rally at an HBCU, you can see Howard's homecoming, and these kids start saying, well, look, I'm going to the league anyway, or I might as well go have this experience, or I've been feeling marginalized all my years, and now they're telling me come home to the HBCU. Then you're going to see a lot of things changing. And Deion Sanders won't be considered a one-off. He will be considered the trailblazer to bring it back. And the last thing, the NBA and the NFL decades ago, all the black players came from HBCUs.
Exactly.
It was just when those white schools like the Alabamas of the world started saying, okay, we'll let, African Americans come play. Then, and what we do, we all ran for that. And that became the norm and that became the standard. And I still think, Terry, that we're going to have to go through a little bit of, what was that term that we use? I don't want to use the exact one as I go back. We want to go through a little bit of that internalized devaluation where we stop deifying these white institutions as if they are the end-all to be-all. Say what you want, man. I've been on campus at Western Michigan University, and I've been on campus at Morehouse. I'll tell you what. Imagine one campus experience was different than the other. And somebody might be quick to say, well, Morehouse, that's an all-male school. Yeah, it was an all-male school, but Spelman was right next door. Clark was right around the block. And at the time, Morrisville was there. When I talk about quality experience, quality of life, lifelong friends, and I'm sorry, when I got on that PWI, that predominantly white institutions campus, it was a void. The campus was big and wide, but it just wasn't for me. I just felt that it wasn't for me. And the people, the faces I saw were the brown faces that I just already knew. I'm watching the time, Terry, and I think we've done very well with our discussion. Again, in summary, and I want to let you finish up as well, I want to thank the Association for Applied Sports Psychology and putting on a webinar. I want to thank Dr. Kensa Gunter of the Association for Applied Sports Psychology. I want to thank Dr. John McCarthy, but also Dr. Lisa Carter of Long Island University, Brooklyn, for all her trailblazing work. And I think what we've done is, Terry, we've created something on today's podcast. And whether someone's listening to us now, listens to us through Facebook Live, catch us on the streets is watching Saturday and Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, they are going to be able to get something that can be helpful to them, whether they're influencer as a coach, as a player, or whatever it may be. I think we've really put something together that can be beneficial. So with that, I can defer to you to get your final thoughts before we wrap things up.
So like always leave some kind of application that we could use with the message today. I think really the biggest thing, I've been blessed to be able to read and to look at that slideshow. This is a common ground. I've been saying that a lot this show, a common ground as a neutral space that people can revert to. And, I think it gives both sides the same amount of power. Because at the end of the day, I mean, the more like left side of the background, they still have to apply those same things with the guy that's on the right, being able to listen. And, I think that's very important to put in there. But I think this is a great area for those, who feel that way and are going through changes, whether it's at their job, whether it's at work, you got a coworker that's been saying a lot of these things and you're not feeling too comfortable, where a lot of times you don't feel comfortable going in that work. this is a chance for you to feel empowered and bring this up, have those conversations, be strong, stand your ground, talk about these things, just like how you see all these white terrorist groups standing their ground, stand your ground, feel good about how, you know, validate your feelings, like I love to say, validate your feelings, talk about this, use this as a tool to bring and show compassion, allow them, really get them to understand how you feel. I think that's very key, and they will empathize with you and show compassion. And I think it's very key that we use this tool. I think this is a very good tool. I'm very blessed to read it and for you to share it with me. And I think this is a good start. But now we just have to apply it to ourselves. I mean, we can have all these great tools, but like on the first show, I believe I talked about what can I do. These are the answers to that question. I think I love how we bring these tools up and bring these answers to the question. Now we just have to apply it to ourselves. It's the next thing. I mean, we got the best jump shot in the world, but if we don't shoot it, we don't shoot the ball. I mean, what's the point? I mean, we might as well, shoot like Shaq and not like Curry. I like to say,
Right.
but yeah. So apply it to yourself, stand your ground, and really kind of build these broken bridges together.
Well, I like that. Building those broken bridges together. Joined by my co-host, Mr. Terry McCord Jr. This is Lindsay Huddleston, and I want to say on behalf of Coach Orlando Watkins for the SPS Edge Show, we want to thank you guys for tuning in. You can follow us at the SPS Edge on YouTube. You can follow Terry McCord at TERRY.MCCORD15 at both Twitter and Instagram, and you can get the SPS Edge at Instagram as well. And you can follow me on Sports Psychology Solutions on Facebook, as well as Coach Orlando Watkins if you want to be connected with someone who's doing some great things in the basketball and coaching community. So with that, we want to thank you guys. I appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time with the SPS Edge Show. Thank you.